Hey, it's Emily, and today I wanted to go over a few spreadsheets I created to help keep track of video game purchases for 2024. This is a follow-up to my last video where I audited my 2023 video game purchases to kind of assess what sort of spending habits I was doing, especially regarding a lot of FOMO purchases I was making. And I personally found spreadsheets to be super helpful when it comes to budgeting and just being very conscious about where our dollars are going, especially in this very expensive collecting hobby. I've been using budgeting spreadsheets for the past couple years and I found them super helpful, and I'm hoping that this video game centered one will also be helpful for many of you. So let's go take a look, and I will kind of explain how to use this one and also how to customize it to fit your own needs. All right, so here is the 2024 game buying tracking spreadsheet. As you see here, there are a few different tabs, and I'll explain what each of them are and also how to fill out this first sheet here. So this purchasing sheet will be just where you record all of the games that you purchase and for what price. And I put in a lot of different columns as descriptors to make the analysis a bit more interesting in the acquisition and spending analysis tabs. As kind of just a brief explanation, each row represents each game that you purchase. And here is the purchasing date. So if you wanted to do a monthly kind of tracking, that will make that a little bit easier. Here is where you put the title of the game, if you just want to make note of which games you bought throughout the year, as well as the purchasing price, what system. And here I have a drop down, which you'll see many drop downs here, just to make it simple, of all the different systems you might be collecting for. And I have more than probably most people collect for, so you could definitely go down here to the edit button, and you're able to kind of trash or remove the different variables that you don't need. So say you're not interested in collecting this Sega Pico. You could just simply trash it and it's removed. And here you want to also be very careful and put apply all, just so that there's not inconsistencies throughout the spreadsheet. I've also broken this down to not only games that you could track, but if you wanted to track what DLC you're buying digitally, or what accessories you might be buying, or different consoles, a subscription service, or just other, like maybe books or something. You could also, again, customize this, not only with removing some of these options, but you could also add another item here. If, say, you wanted to track gaming related books or art books or something. So let's hit art books. And here in the drop down, you'll see that art books has now been added. For edition, I have standards, limited, special, digital. Again, you could customize this to whatever you want to specifically track, as well as the region. I just have 3 here for now: PAL, Asia, and then North America. I also have NA here if you wanted to, say, track digital games that don't necessarily have a region. Whether or not something was a retail release. One of the things I noticed for my 2023 video game audit was I was buying a lot of FOMO purchases from these limited print companies. So this is something I specifically want to track, but if you don't want to track this, you can simply just highlight the entire column, right click it, and delete the column. That's not something you want to track. The condition, if this is for a physical game, I have different options here, and you could of course add more or take away some. What publisher? This one is definitely not complete. I kind of just put a bunch of different publishers that I personally collect, and I think this is definitely one that you might have to address by editing to fit your own needs, and if you also want to track this or not. Similar with genre. I have a lot of different genres here, but this is definitely not encompassing all of them. Double dipping is something I wanted to track personally because I've noticed there are a few games that I've bought on multiple platforms, and I know many of you also like to double dip on digital games as well as physical games, so this would be a way to track that. Right now I just have it as a yes or no, just to make it simple, but again, you could customize this to be a little bit more in-depth if you so wish. And I also wanted to kind of keep track of how many of these games that I purchased this year I actually played. So here at the top is NA, so this will apply to like consoles or art books. Maybe you didn't really play them, and so it's not something you really wanted to keep track of. But the other options are unplayed, played, and completed, if that's something you also wanted to track. And then finally, lastly here, I have release date. If you wanted to keep track of how many new 2024 releases you're buying, this is something you could do. So this is sort of a dummy mock-up. And I'm going to switch over to the next sheet, which I titled as sales. So this is totally optional, but if you're someone who likes to buy games and then trade them in or sell them off, this might be a good way to keep track of that as well, especially if on net you're interested in what games you accumulated throughout the year, take into account which ones you may have sold off or traded in. So this is structured just the same as the previous sheet. You could just kind of go through here and fill it out. All right, so now we're going to get into the fun stuff, which is all the analysis and statistics of kind of looking at in depth what our buying and spending habits were. So first I'm going to go over the acquisition analysis tab. So this is going to give us an idea of how many games we purchased throughout the year, what sort of games, what sort of systems, and etc. Kind of based off of what we filled in those first two sheets. So you're going to notice that there are three columns here. So everything in red is going to correspond with purchases, because when you spend money, you get a little bit in the red, right? So that's why I color coded it that way. Then next to that are all of the sold games. So this is only going to take into account the sales or the trade-in spreadsheet. So I color coded this green because this kind of gives you a little bit back in the green. And then finally, this third section here is going to be the net. So it's going to take how many games you purchased, subtracting those that you sold off. So you could kind of get an idea of on net what games you acquired throughout 2024. So before I go over this section, I do want to note that the net columns can be a little bit confusing to interpret, especially if you happen to sell more games than purchase throughout the year. So some of the percentages might get a little bit messed up. You might have some negative percentages, which will be difficult to interpret. So if that's something that confuses you, you could simply just delete column K here if you don't want to see that. But for the most part, if you end up buying more games than selling, the net shouldn't be that difficult to interpret. So these first few rows here is kind of just the breakdown of how many games you acquired on a monthly basis. So this will give you an idea if, say, for example, you're acquiring more games around Black Friday, and you'll notice that November and December you acquired more games than maybe the prior months. So this will give you a nice breakdown, especially towards the end of the year, once you kind of have the full picture of what your year's buying is like. And then here I'll give you just the rundown total of how many games you bought, sold, and on net, as well as give you a monthly average and median. Right now this is being skewed by all the zeros in the months that haven't happened yet. So the month average and median don't really mean much, but once we complete the year, it'll give you some, I think, valuable information. Scroll down a bit. Here I have the item breakdown. So remember the column where you can kind of drop down and indicate if something's a game, a subscription service, or console. This will give you an idea of just cumulatively how many games you bought, how many consoles you purchased, how much DLC did you buy, or whatever else you wanted to track. And then I also have uncategorized here in case you forgot to do the drop down, just so that you're not missing something on accident. Now, further down here are purchased games by system, new 2024 releases, as well as the edition of the game you purchased. So these are less specific to physical games, so that's sort of why I have this bordered off in its own little row section. But as we scroll further down, this is more geared towards physical game buying, because it's going to give you the breakdown by region, whether or not it's a retail release, and what sort of condition the game you purchased or sold was in. And then here are just some miscellaneous things that you could take or leave. If you wanted to highlight how many Nintendo published games you purchased throughout the year, I'll give you the rundown total, as well as by genre, and etc. And I'm just going to quickly go over what things you probably should tweak and what you probably shouldn't tweak if you're customizing this yourself. I'm using various formulas here, and I'll have a little explanation in the About tab to explain exactly what the formulas mean. But the count ifs just means that you have multiple different statements, and if they're true, that cell in the spreadsheet is going to count those specific items. So here, for monthly purchases in January, here I'm saying that We want to count how many purchases that were games. That's what A21 is, game. And also purchases that only count that were purchased between these two dates. And this is sort of this part of the spreadsheet you do not want to customize, and that is the date ranges. So you kind of just don't want to touch this unless you want to upgrade this to next year. But how the spreadsheet is formatted right now, it shouldn't give you any problems just to use it and how it is right now. Same goes for all these other kind of breakdowns. It will count if the purchases were, again, a game from that specific purchasing column. So it's looking at basically this column and just counting up how many games are on this specific sheet. So that kind of just gives you an idea of how the formulas work. I put a lot of thought into creating the spreadsheet so that it could be very hands-off if you don't want to kind of dive into the different formulas and reformatting for the spreadsheet, and trying to make it as customizable as possible. So for example here, we have a lot of different systems. I've only listed 5 of them, but say you don't want to track PC games because you don't really purchase digital games for your PC. You could instead, for example, track PS4 games. And this should update once you add more in the purchasing spreadsheet. And say there's more than 5 systems that you wanted to keep track of. My suggestion is to take the last row of each section, insert one row below. Say we wanted to track PS3 games. You can drag and drop this. So it's like so, but when it does this, you'll notice that it has the wrong, it's pointing to the wrong type of game here. So if you notice here, the last part of the formula has A21 at the end, and then it updates to A22. So this is not the right thing. This is pointing to DLC, A22. So all you have to do is edit this to A21. So it's again tracking games. And here, you want this to be B21. So it's dividing the cell next to it divided by the total number of games from the breakdown. So you just have to make those little updates if you want to expand upon the different rows. So hopefully my little explanation makes sense. Again, I will, in the About section here, be updating the different things to be careful about when you do customize the spreadsheet to fit your own needs. So we're going to move on to the spending analysis sheet. And here it's basically kind of a carbon copy of acquisition analysis, but instead of the number of games or number of systems or whatever you're tracking, it's going to instead track the amount spent on each of those categories. So here I have 2 different monthly distribution breakdowns. At the top here is the overall spending. So if you wanted to take into consideration both how much you're spending on consoles, games, DLCs, etc., this will be everything that you've put into the tracking spreadsheets. But if you scroll down a little further, here is just the total amount spent on games alone, if that's something you want to keep track of specifically. And again, we're looking at how much we spent on new purchases, and you could take into consideration how much you've sold or how much credit you received from trading in games. And then finally, what it is on net. So here in the example, we spent $170 in total for video game stuff, sold about 80, and that means on net, the year is about $90. And then again, similar to the acquisition tab, this is the breakdown of how much we spent for each type of item, and then how many we spent on different systems. You could then again do the insert below and say you wanted to look at PS4 games, see how much you spent on PS4 games. You're going to have to do the same trick where this is going to have to be now a 40 to correspond to this cell. And similarly here, we want to have the correct denominator. So this will be 40 again. But yeah, this is again similar to what I showed in the previous tab and different purchasing habits that you might want to be conscious about where your dollars are going towards. And right now I'm only highlighting again the things that I put into the tracking sheet. If you wanted to make your own column here, say you're interested in tracking what stores you're purchasing from, you can make your own little drop down thing by going to data data validation, and then add a new rule. So here the different options could be, say, Amazon, Best Buy, GameStop, etc. And so that will give you some new drop downs to consider. And then you can make your own little area for the analysis. So instead of by played status, you could have this by store. And this could be Amazon, Best Buy, GameStop. So this is the first input here is going to be the column of interest. So in our purchasing spreadsheet, this is column N. So we're going to change this all to N. And so this also corresponds with the specific category we're interested in. So here it's Amazon and it's tracking the right one. And here we have to change this again to 21 so that it's tracking specifically games with this category. All right, so that's sort of my tutorial of how to use the spreadsheet and how to customize it. Again, this about section, I'm going to fill out more, linking both this video to provide a tutorial and some important things to consider when customizing this. If you don't want to customize this at all, you can simply use what is already here and just fill out what suits your needs and delete all the other things that you may not want to track or deem necessary for your purchasing habits. For example, I've already started customizing and entering in some records for my own video game purchases for the year. So far, I've purchased 2 games, Biting Codus and Hakioki Chronicle of Wind and Blossom. And so I ordered these both off of PlayAsia. And so I entered how much I paid for both, what system they're for, the game edition, what region, if they're retail releases, the condition, the publisher, what genre, if they're double dips. For Hakioki, I do have the Vita version of the first game, but I intend on selling that. So that's why I'm saying it's not a double dip. And of course they're unplayed because they haven't shipped to me yet. I think Hakioki's for pre-order right now. It's coming out sometime in spring this year. And then I have also been filling out the sales tab in my own kind of way. So I've blacked out exactly what game I sold just for privacy reasons. But I put how much I got on net from that and the other details about it. And for my spending analysis, I'm actually not keeping track of a sales column because I don't intend on selling a lot of games this year. There's just going to be a few off that I do want to sell. So I've entered in just the sum of how many games I've sold in this sales tab here. If I also end up selling some consoles or accessories or something else related to video games, I'm going to accumulate those totals here and then just keep track of what the net total is for everything I purchased and sold for the year. So that's going to simplify things from what I shared earlier. So as you can see in the early stages, these analytics aren't too interesting, but I think as we start to fill this out throughout the year, it's going to be more interesting to see kind of where our spending and just buying habits end up going. And I think also keeping tabs of this will also might help curb some spending, or at least some unnecessary spending, or make us think about it a second time if we have to enter it in and everything. So I hope many of you guys find this spreadsheet helpful in some way, and I hope many of you will join me on this journey of keeping track of how much we've spent on video games throughout this year. I might do a mid-year check-in just to see how things are going and kind of look at some of these tracking things to see what I might want to curb or kind of allow myself to spend towards video games sometime in like June, July, maybe. And then definitely I want to do another audit towards the end of this year, just to give an overall assessment of how my year went. And hopefully many of you will also kind of take part and share your own journeys of how things went. But that's everything for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. I have a new video coming out later this week that I'm still editing, but hoping to have out soon. Let me know if you have any questions regarding the spreadsheet down below, or if there are any cool customizable options you thought of that you want to incorporate to track throughout the year. I'd love to hear about it. Maybe I'll incorporate it into my own as well. So until my next video, bye guys.